Chapter 1. The Perfect Storm. The credit card statement stared back at me like a guilty confession. $743. That's what I'd spent on Christmas gifts for people who were about to erase me from their lives like a bad memory. I'm Jake Morrison, 36 years old, and I fix air conditioning units for a living. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps my hands busy. What it doesn't do is prepare you for the kind of betrayal that comes wrapped in holiday cheer and family traditions. The apartment felt different that December morning, colder somehow, despite the heater running full blast. My wife Lena was in the shower, humming some tune I didn't recognize. Through the bathroom door, I could hear her phone buzzing on the nightstand. It had been doing that a lot lately. "Honey, your phone's going crazy," I called out. "Just ignore it," she replied, her voice echoing off the tiles. "Probably just work stuff." Work stuff, right. Because insurance adjusters get so many urgent calls at 7 in the morning on a Saturday. I'd been noticing things for weeks now. Little things that individually meant nothing but together painted a picture I didn't want to see. The way she'd angle her phone away from me when texting. How she'd suddenly developed an interest in going to the gym 3 times a week. The new perfume that smelled expensive and unfamiliar. But the biggest red flag was Rick. Rick Donovan was Lena's ex-boyfriend from college. They dated for 2 years before she met me, and according to family lore, her parents had loved him like a son. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, polished, worked in finance, drove a BMW, and had the kind of smile that made people trust him with their retirement funds. He'd moved back to town 3 months ago after his divorce, and suddenly Lena was running into him everywhere. The grocery store, the coffee shop, the mall. What were the odds? "We just talked about old times," she'd say, whenever I brought it up. "He's going through a rough patch with the divorce. I'm just being friendly." Friendly. That word was starting to make my skin crawl. The shower shut off, and I quickly moved away from her phone. No point starting a fight before I had my coffee. But as I walked to the kitchen, her phone buzzed again, and again. I poured myself a cup and stared out the window at our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson walking her ancient poodle. Normal people doing normal things on a normal Saturday morning. I envied them. "Jake, have you seen my phone?" Lena appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a towel, water still dripping from her dark hair. "On the nightstand where you left it." She disappeared back into the bedroom, and I heard the telltale sounds of rapid texting. When she emerged 15 minutes later, fully dressed and made up, she was already reaching for her purse. "I'm meeting Sarah for lunch," she announced, not quite meeting my eyes. Sarah was her sister, and while they were close, they didn't usually do impromptu Saturday lunches. But I'd learned to pick my battles. "What time will you be back?" "Not sure. We might do some shopping after. You know how it is." I didn't, actually, but I nodded anyway. After she left, I sat in the silence of our apartment and tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Marriages go through rough patches. People need space. These were normal things that normal couples dealt with all the time. But then I remembered the conversation I'd overheard 2 nights ago. I'd gotten up to get a glass of water and heard Lena on the phone in the living room, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't make out most of it, but I caught fragments. "Can't keep doing this," and "he's starting to notice," and the one that made my blood run cold. "After the holidays, we'll figure it out." When I'd walked into the room, she'd quickly ended the call and claimed it was her mother having insomnia. But her mother lived in Florida, and it would have been 3 in the morning there. The lies were getting sloppy, which meant either she was getting careless or she didn't care if I caught her anymore. Neither option was particularly comforting. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning the apartment and trying not to think about what "after the holidays" meant. Was she planning to leave me? Had she already mentally checked out of our marriage? Were the Christmas gifts I'd carefully selected for her parents just props in some elaborate farewell performance? The gifts. God, the gifts. I'd spent weeks thinking about what to get Robert and Margaret Hoffman, Lena's parents. They were good people, but they'd never quite warmed up to me. I was too blue-collar for their taste, too rough around the edges. But I'd tried. Every Christmas, every birthday, every anniversary, I'd tried to prove I was worthy of their daughter. This year, I'd really outdone myself. For Robert, a first edition copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that had cost me $300, but that I knew he'd treasure. For Margaret, a vintage silk scarf from the boutique downtown that she'd admired when we'd walked past it together last month. And for Lena, the ring. It wasn't huge, my salary didn't allow for huge, but it was beautiful. A simple solitaire with a diamond that caught the light just right. I'd been carrying it around for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to propose. Christmas dinner at her parents' house had seemed ideal, surrounded by family, full of good food and holiday spirit, ready to start the next chapter of our lives together. Now, sitting in our empty apartment with the sound of my own breathing for company, that plan seemed laughably naive. My phone rang, startling me out of my brooding. It was my buddy Tom from work. "Hey man, you want to grab a beer? Kelly's got the kids at her mom's place and I'm going stir crazy." Tom Chen was one of the few guys I could stand to be around for more than an hour. He was honest, funny, and had never once made me feel like I needed to apologize for fixing air conditioners instead of managing hedge funds. "Sure," I said. "Murphy's? See you in 20. Murphy's Tavern was the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your drink order, and nobody cared what you did for a living as long as you tipped the bartender and didn't start fights. Tom was already there when I arrived, nursing a beer and watching college football on the big screen. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Thanks. You always know just what to say. Seriously, what's going on? You've been weird for weeks." I ordered a beer and considered how much to tell him. Tom was a good friend, but he was also friends with Lena. If I was wrong about what was happening, I didn't want to poison the well. "Just holiday stress," I said finally. "You know how it is." "Bullshit. This is about Lena, isn't it?" Sometimes I forgot how perceptive Tom could be. He'd been married to Kelly for 8 years and had developed a sixth sense about relationship trouble. "Maybe, I don't know. Things have been different lately." "Different how?" I took a long pull of my beer and watched the football game for a minute. On screen, some quarterback was getting sacked by a guy twice his size. I knew the feeling. She's been distant, secretive, and her ex-boyfriend moved back to town. Tom whistled low. "The finance guy? Rick something?" "Donovan, yeah." "And you think—" I don't know what to think. But something's not right. We sat in silence for a while, watching the game and drinking our beers. Finally, Tom spoke up. "You want my advice? Talk to her. Straight up, no games. Ask her what's going on. What if I don't like the answer? Then at least you'll know where you stand." Chapter 2. The Sister's Truth. Sunday morning brought freezing rain and the kind of gray sky that made you want to crawl back under the covers and pretend the world didn't exist. Lena was still asleep when I got up, curled on her side, with her phone clutched in her hand like a security blanket. I made coffee and toast and tried to work up the courage to follow Tom's advice. Just ask her straight out. But every time I looked at her sleeping face, peaceful and beautiful in the morning light, I lost my nerve. What if I was wrong? What if I was letting paranoia destroy the best thing in my life? She woke up around 10, stumbled to the kitchen in an old t-shirt and pajama pants, and kissed my cheek like she had 1,000 times before. "Morning, babe. Sleep okay?" "Like a rock. You?" "Fine." She poured herself coffee and checked her phone. Always the phone. "Oh, Sarah wants to have lunch again today. Girl talk, you know?" 2 days in a row seemed excessive, even for sisters, but I just nodded. "Actually," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "I was thinking we should talk about Christmas plans. Your parents' dinner is next week, right?" Something flickered across her face. Just for a second, but I caught it. "Right. Christmas Eve dinner, like always. Should I pick up anything? Wine, dessert?" "No, Mom's got it all covered." She wasn't meeting my eyes now, suddenly very interested in her coffee mug. "What about the gifts? I've got your dad's book and your mom's scarf. Think they'll like them?" "I'm sure they'll love them." Her voice sounded strained, like she was forcing the words out. And I was thinking— I took a deep breath. Maybe Christmas Eve would be a good time to make an announcement. You know, about our future. She looked up sharply. What kind of announcement? This was it. The moment of truth. I could feel the ring box in my pocket, a small weight that suddenly felt enormous. "Lena, I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to—" "Jake, stop." She set down her coffee mug with shaking hands. Just stop. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, the freezing rain tapped against the windows with increasing urgency. We need to talk, she said finally. 4 words that every man dreads hearing. 4 words that usually mean your world is about to collapse. Okay, let's talk. But instead of talking, she started crying. Not the gentle tears of a romantic moment, but the ugly, gut-wrenching sobs of someone whose carefully constructed lies were finally crumbling. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Jake. I'm so fucking sorry. And just like that, I knew. Before she said another word, before she confessed or explained or tried to justify what she'd done, I knew. The phone calls, the secretive behavior, the sudden interest in her appearance, it all made perfect, horrible sense. It's Rick, isn't it? She nodded, still crying. How long? 2 months? Maybe 3? I don't know. It just happened. Happened. Like a car accident or a natural disaster. Something beyond her control. Are you leaving me? She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I don't know. I'm confused. I need time to figure things out. What about Christmas? Your parents' dinner? And there it was. The question that had started this whole conversation. Her face crumpled again. I can't bring you to Christmas. Rick will be there and it would be too awkward. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not only was she cheating on me, but she was uninviting me from family Christmas so she could play house with her ex-boyfriend. Your parents know? She nodded miserably. And they're okay with this? They think Rick and I are better suited for each other. Of course they did. Rick with his BMW and his finance job and his country club membership. Rick, who could give their daughter the life they'd always wanted for her. Rick, who would never embarrass them at dinner parties by talking about air conditioning repair. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. Where are you going? Out. I need to think. Jake, please, can we talk about this? Can we work through it? I turned back to look at her, this woman I'd loved for 3 years, this woman I'd been planning to propose to in a week. Work through what exactly? The fact that you've been fucking your ex-boyfriend for 3 months? Or the fact that you were going to let me show up to Christmas dinner with gifts for your parents while they all knew you were planning to dump me? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Lena? Explain it to me. But she just sat there crying, and I realized there was nothing left to explain. The marriage was over. Had been over for months, apparently. I'd just been too stupid to see it. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Jake, wait. I'll be back later for my things. I drove around aimlessly for hours, trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, I found myself parked outside Tom's house, staring at the Christmas lights he'd strung around his front porch. Normal people doing normal things, building normal lives with people who love them back. I called him from the car. Jake, what's up? She's cheating on me. Shit, where are you? Your driveway. Come inside. Kelly's making soup. The next few hours passed in a blur of concerned friends, hot soup, and the kind of practical advice that people give when someone's life falls apart. Call a lawyer. Find a place to stay. Don't do anything stupid. But I wasn't thinking about lawyers or apartments. I was thinking about Sarah. Lena's sister had always liked me. We'd bonded over our shared status as outsiders in the Hoffman family. Her because she was gay, me because I was poor. If anyone would tell me the truth about what was really going on, it would be Sarah. I called her that evening. Jake, is everything okay? Can we meet somewhere? I need to ask you something. There was a long pause. This is about Lena and Rick, isn't it? You know? Meet me at Denny's on 5th Street. 20 minutes. Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and the expression of someone who'd been dreading this conversation. I wondered when you'd figure it out, she said as I sat down. How long have you known? Since it started. Lena tells me everything. She paused. Well, almost everything. I didn't know she was planning to uninvite you from Christmas until yesterday. And you didn't think to tell me? It wasn't my place. I kept hoping she'd come to her senses and end it with Rick. Sarah stirred her coffee absently. For what it's worth, I think she's making a huge mistake. Your parents don't seem to think so, Sarah snorted. My parents have been planning Lena and Rick's reunion since the day he moved back to town. They never liked you, Jake. I'm sorry, but it's true. You're a good man, but you're not what they wanted for their daughter. And what did they want? Money, status, someone who looks good at the country club. She leaned forward. Rick's been coming to Sunday dinners for weeks. Mom's been treating him like the prodigal son returning home. And Lena? She's been eating it up. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Not just Lena's affair, but the systematic erasure of our relationship by her entire family. They'd been planning my replacement while I was shopping for Christmas gifts. What about Christmas Eve? Rick will be there. They've already set a place for him at the table. Sarah's voice was bitter. Your place. I sat back in the booth, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. She never planned to tell me, did she? I don't think so. I think she was going to let you show up and figure it out for yourself. That's fucking cruel. Yeah, it is. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Jake. You deserve better than this. Chapter 3. The Gifts. I spent Monday night in a cheap motel, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what to do next. The gifts I'd bought for the Hoffmans sat on the dresser, still wrapped in their cheerful Christmas paper. $743 worth of thoughtful presents for people who'd already written me out of their lives. The ring box felt heavy in my pocket. I pulled it out and opened it, watching the diamond catch the light from the flickering motel sign outside my window. Such a small thing to represent such big dreams. By Tuesday morning, I'd made my decision. I drove to the Hoffman house at 10 a.m., knowing Robert would be at work, but Margaret would be home. Their house was a sprawling colonial in the kind of neighborhood where people hired landscapers and drove luxury cars. The driveway was freshly plowed, and someone had already hung a wreath on the front door. Margaret answered my knock with a surprised expression that quickly shifted to something resembling guilt. Jake, we weren't expecting you. I know, can I come in? I have something for you and Robert. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder like she was expecting someone else to appear. Of course, come in. The living room was decorated for Christmas with the kind of tasteful elegance that money could buy. A massive tree dominated one corner, surrounded by perfectly wrapped presents. The mantel was draped with garland and expensive-looking ornaments. Everything was beautiful and cold and completely lacking in warmth. Can I get you some coffee? No, thank you. This won't take long. I set the wrapped gifts on her coffee table and watched her face carefully. These are for you and Robert. I wanted to give them to you in person. Jake, you didn't need to. Yes, I did. I kept my voice calm and level. I've been part of this family for 3 years. Every Christmas, every birthday, every anniversary. I've tried to show you both how much I care about Lena and how grateful I am that you raised such a wonderful daughter. Margaret's face was getting redder by the minute. But I've learned some things recently that have changed my perspective. Jake, perhaps we should wait until Robert gets home. No, I think now is perfect. I gestured toward the gifts. Go ahead, open them. With shaking hands, she unwrapped the scarf first. Even in her obvious discomfort, I saw her eyes light up when she saw it. It was exactly what she'd wanted. It's beautiful, she whispered. I remembered you admiring it when we walked past the boutique. I went back the next day and bought it. I paused. That was 6 weeks ago, before I knew that you and Robert were already planning to replace me. She set the scarf down carefully and reached for the second gift. The book was even more of a hit. Robert was a huge Harper Lee fan, and finding a first edition had taken me weeks of searching online auctions. He'll love this, she said softly. I know, because despite what you might think of me, I pay attention, I listen, I care about the people in my life. Margaret was crying now, and I felt a moment of satisfaction. Good. She should feel guilty. I know about Rick, I continued. I know about the Sunday dinners and the Christmas Eve plans. I know that you've been encouraging Lena to leave me for him. Jake, it's not what? Not personal? Not about the fact that I fix air conditioners instead of managing investment portfolios? Not about the fact that I drive a 10-year-old truck instead of a BMW? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's what I don't understand, I said, standing up. You raised Lena to be honest and kind and loyal. At least I thought you did. But the woman who's been lying to me for 3 months, who was planning to humiliate me at your Christmas dinner, that's not the woman I fell in love with. That's someone else entirely. People change, Margaret said quietly. Yeah, they do. And sometimes they change because the people around them encourage them to be their worst selves instead of their best ones. I headed toward the door, then turned back. I want you to know that I was planning to propose to Lena at Christmas dinner. I've been carrying around an engagement ring for 2 weeks, trying to work up the courage to ask your permission first. I pulled out the ring box and set it on the table next to the gifts. But I guess that conversation would have been pretty awkward with Rick sitting in my chair. Margaret gasped, staring at the ring. Keep the gifts, I said. Consider them a farewell present. But I want you to remember something every time you look at them. You had a son-in-law who loved your daughter enough to spend his last $700 making sure you had a perfect Christmas, and you threw him away for someone with a better credit score. I left her sitting there with her expensive gifts and her guilty conscience and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The divorce papers were filed by Thursday. Lena had been calling and texting constantly, but I'd ignored her. What was the point? Everything that needed to be said had been said in that awful conversation on Sunday morning. But Thursday evening, she showed up at Tom's house, where I'd been staying. Jake, please, we need to talk. Tom answered the door and looked back at me questioningly. I nodded. Might as well get this over with. I'll be in the kitchen, he said diplomatically. Lena looked terrible. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her hair was unwashed. And she was wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in the day before. You filed for divorce. Yes, without even trying to work things out. I stared at her in disbelief. Work things out? Lena, you've been fucking another man for 3 months. You uninvited me from Christmas so you could play house with him. What exactly is there to work out? I made a mistake. No. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. A mistake is double booking dinner plans. What you did was make a choice, multiple choices, every day for 3 months. She started crying again, and I felt nothing. No urge to comfort her, no desire to take her in my arms and tell her everything would be okay. Just a cold, empty feeling where my love for her used to be. Rick and I, it's not what you think. Really? What is it then? It's complicated. He was going through his divorce, and I was feeling neglected. Neglected? My voice rose, despite my efforts to stay calm. How exactly were you neglected? You work all the time. We never go anywhere nice. We never do anything exciting. I work all the time because I was saving money to buy you an engagement ring and pay for a wedding. We don't go anywhere nice because I was putting every extra dollar aside for our future. I laughed bitterly. A future that apparently you'd already decided you didn't want. That's not true. Then why didn't you tell me about Rick? Why didn't you break up with me before you started sleeping with him? She didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe she did, but she was smart enough to know I wouldn't like it. I want another chance, she said finally. To do what? Cheat on me more discreetly next time? To choose you. To choose us. You already chose. You chose Rick. You chose your parents' approval. You chose the easy path. I stood up. And honestly, I'm glad you did. Because now I know who you really are. Jake, please. No. We're done, Lena. Sign the papers and move on with your life. She left crying, and Tom emerged from the kitchen with 2 beers. You okay? I will be. But I wasn't okay. I was angry. Angrier than I'd ever been in my life. Not just at Lena, but at her parents, at Rick, at the whole fucking situation. They'd all conspired to humiliate me, and they'd very nearly succeeded. The anger was still burning in my chest on Friday, when I ran into my old friend Dave at the hardware store. Jake, haven't seen you in forever. How's married life treating you? Dave had been at our wedding. He'd given a toast about true love and happily ever after. The irony was almost too much to bear. Actually, Lena and I are getting divorced. His face fell. Oh man, I'm sorry. I had no idea. Yeah, well, these things happen. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? I gave him the short version: cheating, lies, family conspiracy. By the time I finished, Dave looked like he wanted to punch something. That's fucked up, man. Really fucked up. Tell me about it. You know what? Fuck her and fuck her family. You're better off without them. I appreciated the sentiment, but it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, having to tell the story out loud just made me angrier. Listen, Dave continued, Sarah and I are having a New Year's Eve party. You should come. Meet some new people, have some fun. Life's too short to waste it on people who don't appreciate you. I almost said no automatically. The last thing I wanted was to be the recently divorced guy at a party full of happy couples. But then I thought about Lena and Rick, probably planning their own New Year's Eve celebration, and my anger flared again. You know what? Yeah, I'll be there. Great. And Jake, bring your A game. Sarah's got some single friends who are going to love you. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. New Year's Eve arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. I'd spent the week between Christmas and New Year's moving my stuff out of the apartment I'd shared with Lena and into a small place across town. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom in an older building, but it was mine. Dave's party was in full swing by the time I arrived. The house was packed with people I half recognized from high school and college, all of them seemingly having a great time. I grabbed a beer and tried to blend into the background, but Dave spotted me immediately. Jake, there he is. Come on, let me introduce you to some people. For the next hour, I made small talk with strangers and tried to pretend I was having fun. It wasn't working. All I could think about was this time last year, when Lena and I had spent New Year's Eve curled up on the couch, watching movies and making plans for the future. I was considering making my excuses and leaving when I saw them. Lena and Rick were standing in the doorway, looking around like they owned the place. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something expensive and clingy that showed off her figure. Rick had his arm around her waist, in a gesture that was clearly meant to mark his territory. My first instinct was to leave through the back door and avoid the whole mess. But then, I saw the way they were looking at me, not with guilt or embarrassment, but with something that looked almost like pity, like I was some pathetic creature to be pitied. That's when the anger I'd been carrying around for a week finally boiled over. I walked straight up to them, ignoring the way conversations stopped around us. Well, well, look what the cat dragged in. Jake. Lena's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know you'd be here. Really? Because Dave's been my friend since high school. Where exactly did you think I'd be on New Year's Eve? Sitting at home crying into my beer? Rick stepped forward slightly, putting himself between Lena and me. Look, man, we don't want any trouble. Trouble? I laughed, loud enough that people across the room started staring. Why would there be trouble? I'm just saying hello to my ex-wife and her boyfriend, the one she was fucking while she was still married to me. Jake, please, Lena started. Please what? Please don't embarrass you in front of all these people? The way you embarrassed me when you uninvited me from Christmas dinner so you could play house with this asshole? The room had gone completely quiet now. Everyone was watching our little drama unfold like it was a reality TV show. That's enough, Rick said, his voice taking on an edge. You're drunk. I'm not drunk, I'm just honest. Something you two might want to try sometime? We should go, Lena said, tugging on Rick's arm. Yeah, you should. But before you do, I want everyone here to know exactly what kind of people you are. I turned to address the room, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my ex-wife, Lena, and her boyfriend, Rick. They've been fucking behind my back for 3 months while I was saving up money to buy her an engagement ring. Her parents helped them plan their little reunion, even going so far as to uninvite me from Christmas dinner so Rick could take my place at the table. The crowd was staring in fascination. Some people looked horrified. Others seemed to be enjoying the show. But here's the best part, I continued. I found out about their affair on the same day I was planning to propose. I'd already bought the ring, already picked out the perfect moment. Christmas Eve dinner, surrounded by family, ready to start the next chapter of our lives together. I pulled the ring box out of my pocket and held it up for everyone to see. $2,000. That's what this cost me. 2 months worth of overtime and weekend work. But hey, at least now I know what my marriage was really worth. Jake, stop. Lena was crying now, but I was beyond caring. You want to know the really fucked up part? I actually went to her parents' house and gave them their Christmas presents anyway. $700 worth of thoughtful gifts for people who'd already decided I wasn't good enough for their daughter. I opened the ring box and pulled out the diamond ring, holding it up so it caught the light. So here's what I'm going to do with this symbol of my love and commitment. I walked over to the sliding glass door that led to Dave's back deck and opened it. The cold air rushed in, making several people shiver. I'm going to throw it as far as I can into Dave's backyard. Maybe some lucky squirrel will find it and have better luck with love than I did. No! Lena lunged forward, but I was already drawing my arm back. The ring sailed out into the darkness, disappearing somewhere in the snow-covered yard. The crowd let out a collective gasp. There, I said, closing the door. Now it's really over. I turned back to face Lena and Rick, both of whom looked like they'd seen a ghost. Enjoy your new life together. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be. And I hope you remember this moment every time someone asks you how you got together. I walked toward the front door, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Rick? Next time you want to steal someone's wife, maybe don't be such a coward about it. Have the balls to tell the husband to his face, instead of sneaking around like a teenager. I left them standing there in front of a room full of people who would be talking about this story for years to come. As I walked to my truck, I could hear the buzz of conversation starting up behind me. My phone was ringing by the time I got home. Text messages started flooding in. Word of the confrontation was already spreading through our social circle like wildfire. Some people were supportive, others thought I'd gone too far. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I'd told the truth. I'd stood up for myself. I'd made sure that everyone knew exactly what kind of people Lena and Rick really were. It wasn't